Um, I suppose you could put this in the op-ed section of the New York Times or particularly the San Francisco Chronicle. I have mixed feelings about this, but I know that my heart cries for everybody that lives up in the Bay Area, and San Francisco in particular, because there's a long history in that place. Particularly if you want to go to what's his name, IBM, International Business Machines. Remember Watson, RB Marduk, right? You all know who Marduk is, right? San Francisco, Bohemian Grove, that whole history. What's her name? The lady in Congress, the old speaker, Nancy Pelosi, that whole gang, right? Everything that came out of San Francisco. Remember Harvey Milk? What's her name became a U.S. Senator, Dianne Feinstein. It's the same gang, same folks, right? And so I grew up there for all, I'm not going to go into my roadmap again, but I watched a video this morning by the California Insider. That's the Epoch Times. These guys are really, as we used to say, gumshoe reporters, right? And so this guy was interviewing, the guy that does interviews on behalf of the Epoch Times, California Insider, was interviewing a lady that apparently moved to San Francisco in 1992, fell in love with San Francisco. It is an international city, so you can meet people from all over the world there, and who have different tastes and likes and lifestyles, right? But with me, I was there in the early 1950s, living in if you know where the University of California, Berkeley is, and you go through the Oakland Tunnel, there's a little tiny bedroom community over there that was called Sleepy Hollow. So I grew up in Sleepy Hollow, right? But we used to go into San Francisco a lot. And even though I normally am out in raging rivers or oceans, surfing in the waves or swimming in the waves and always being with mama, it was the one city that I'd ever been in that I fell in love with because of its creative, artistic expression. When I was there were a lot of artists that were there. So if there's an artist and a musician in you, then you understand what it means to be creative, a creative musician, which means you're not a copycat, you're an original artist. That's nonconformity. That's an anon. That's a non-programmable unit. That's pre-phase. I haven't decided what I'm going to create yet because I'm on fire to create, because I'm experiencing the eternal fire of eternal love. That's basic stuff. So I loved San Francisco because there were so many creative artists that were there, right? And this would be particularly true later in my teenage years when I went back up there during the Haight-Ashbury stuff that was going down there. Remember Timothy Leary and the CIA and doing MK Ultra and all this other kind of stuff that was going down, and the association that UC Berkeley had with their chemists, and Osley, who was part of the Grateful Dead, and a connection that I had to a lab which was in Sausalito to get it directly from Osley. So I was getting LSD directly through basically Berkeley, UC Berkeley, one of their PhD chemists. And that allowed me to get into all the other psychedelic stuff, psilocybin, THC, cannabis, all the most potent stuff that they were basically coming out with, and how that whole culture, electroculture, sort of flourished around there because of a lot of artists that are there, right? And the and the way in which the landscape of consciousness in San Francisco was developed by the folks that represent consciousness energy are experiencing each other there in that area, because you have the way that the land is carved out, which in my mind, from an artistic healer's point of view, is very beautiful, not just because of the ocean and the bays, but the hills and the mountains and the redwoods of the day, which is what I call a landscape, an artistic landscape. That's what I loved about San Francisco, was the artistic landscape, because then you have the Sierra Mountains in the background, like the background landscape in a painting, a holographic painting, right? So I've always thought that particular area on the planet was extremely beautiful, And particularly when you cross over the Golden Gate Bridge, you start going northbound along the coast, right, through the redwoods and head up towards Crescent City. That's some of the most magical places there is, and I know that because I've been there. That's one of my other homes, is when you get up between, oh gosh, Mama, what is it? Say north of Eureka, and you go up into where you hit the border of Oregon, which is 199, right there where Crescent City is, and you go up through the big groves in there, right? Special places. Magical energy there. That's why, matter of fact, if you go up north of Willits on 101 as you're heading up towards Fortuna and say Eureka, I remember driving by many decades ago and seeing a little box, a mailbox with a name on it. Guess whose name was on it? J.R. Tolkien. What does that remind you of? Lord of the Rings. The Redwoods are a very magical place that if you want to sit down and write stories, mythical stories of the elven, right, and all the rest of it, the magic is there in those fern groves and those big tree groves. So it didn't surprise me that's where he was living. But so the point of this is this. I've watched a couple of videos recently, and I was in San Francisco as recently as, on two separate occasions, actually, between Hawaii, Reno, Oregon, and San Francisco, when the COVID stuff was first coming down, right? All the lockdown crap, got to wear a mask and all that junk, right? That's a satanic ritual. Don't breathe, you're dead. That stuff, right? And so I of all places, guess where I ended up? I ended up staying in the oldest homeless shelter in San Francisco. And one of the really neat things, and this was the culture in San Francisco, right? When I was staying in this homeless shelter, the finest restaurants in San Francisco, and San Francisco has some of the finest restaurants, okay? Some of them are like little, you just walk right by them. You could be walking down a street, right? And you would never notice a restaurant was there. You just see a little door with a name on it. But people know where that is, right? So there's a lot of money in San Francisco, okay, from all over the interplanetary galactic scheme of things, right? And but it has a flavor to it because of its creative, artistic, and historical. If you go all the way back to the Spanish and the Mexicans and all that, because Monterey used to be the first capital, then it was San Francisco, and then it became Sacramento. And if you go back to remember the fire in San Francisco, well, that was another deliberate thing that they did. But it has a rich, powerful, spiritual history. That's my point. So what we see now is coupled with what this lady was talking about, where it's not the same. And she mentioned a word, what she noticed was the biggest change. And she said conformity. So when you sort of define this in the political arena of the propaganda between red pill, blue pill, and what do you get when you mix red with blue? Purple, maybe? Right? And how Asha Diane talked about the North and the South, the war between the Draco and the Anunnaki, these going to war against each other. The information that came out through the Voyager materials, right? How you can tie this directly into San Francisco. Actually, all the cities. Because then you herd everybody into the cities off the landscape to have a relationship with nature, the great living spirit, oversoul Mama Earth, right? Herd them into the cities, set up all their antennas, it becomes a kill zone. Now, why does this become a kill zone? Well, the lady in this California Insider little interview is sort of echoing this because another video that I saw tied to that one showed how San Francisco is becoming a ghost town. All the businesses are all boarded up, closed up. I was there right before this was beginning to happen, right? When the homeless shelters were closed up. Then they were giving cards to homeless people that says, hey, We're going to give you free drugs and a free place to stay in these motels. Then all of a sudden you realize the financial district, a lot of folks that live up in Marin County that got a lot of money, they're no longer coming into San Francisco. Somebody was sending them a memo. Okay? So now when you start adding up and you realize there isn't anybody left that's alive in San Francisco, you get into the body snatcher end of things, right? And you realize what's left in San Francisco now that people have moved out. Those that still have a soul left, right? You see how that works? What have we got left here? Robots? The dead. That's what's left there. So the dead begin to feed on themselves because there isn't anybody left alive in there. And you want to know who echoed that? Bill O'Reilly. San Francisco is going to turn into a ghost town looking for vehicles. That's the writing on the wall when I was there a couple of years ago. I spent one night in a planter box right outside, right next to the mayor's office. Good morning, and did a video. I ought to put that video up sometime. But I've always loved San Francisco, and my heart cries because of the experiences that are like locked in time, phase locked in time. Pull the memory up of what it was like to experience being in that city at different times in the 1950s, the 1960s, later on in the 80s, and then more recently in the last couple of years, and seeing the changes that have taken place. Because as a footnote to that, even though I don't do a lot of flying on airplanes, right? We call them tube rides, right? And it's just bad for obvious reasons. Breathing, right? The air you breathe in the airplanes. But San Francisco was one of the few airports that I ever flew out of that seemed modern in the sense that they actually provide you some comfortable places to sleep if you need to sleep over in the airport. In other words, they're actually thinking about you, right? About your well-being, right? So it's not like LAX, right? Which means they're not going to give you any comfortable place to sit down, okay? It's supposed to be hardcore, like you're in a prison, a jail, right? You sit on a concrete bench, so your butt's hitting on something that's hard rather than Mama Earth. Soft dirt, stuff that gives. Hey, be comfortable. Take a nap, right? Relax. No, it's always something to let you know we don't like you. Don't get comfortable here. The message that they send by virtue of what they use their energy to build. So you know they don't have any love for you. So the entire infrastructure on the planet demonstrates that, unless you're in nature with Mama. So you see how this works, where their cities are being emptied out. So what's left in these cities? The dead. Right? So if you wanted to put this in another context about what I've echoed about returning to Mama, right? Because all these cities have all these antennas set up as soft kill weapons, right? This is how it's playing out. And you could actually know this going all the way back to childhood, at least for me in the 1950s, because you got a built-in looking glass. Or if you will, a mapping system. You already know the future because you're already on the other side of it. If that makes any sense to anybody. But it's the nature of the way the energy works. You know? If your energy is being used to destroy yourself, chances are you're going to lose your mirror, right? So the more that you keep using your energy to destroy yourself by what we do to others, it's not going to take very long to lose your mirror and you get sucked down a hole. And ultimately that leads to implosion. Right? So you realize from a free fall point of view and reset point of view and a healing planet, noble planet point of view with a Nomi code, why we're here. So I wanted to put this up because San Francisco. Remember the old song "I Lift My Heart on San Francisco"? It was one of the few cities that I'd ever been in that was in many ways very magical. Particularly when you get up around Golden Gate Park, the Japanese tea gardens, um, some of the artwork, the old Victorian stuff that was there, the way that the houses were built that are still standing. It's not like the stuff they build today that they got to charge you $500,000 and it's got cracks in the walls 6 months later. The workmanship. I know this because I grew up in the construction trades in the early 1960s when I was in high school during when Orange County and LA County was booming. So I worked with a lot of folks that were journeyman carpenters, landscapers, masons, bricklayers, roofers, air conditioning, electric, finished carpenters, laying carpet, drywall, all that stuff, right? And working with all these guys because I love all the different skill sets, becoming a multitasker on how they put all this stuff together. So back then they were using, if you will, better materials, right, than they use now because it's all about this. So you see how a black hole, when it's accelerating, it means that the stuff that they're built is going to erode and corrode and collapse at a higher rate of speed than what it used to. And that's a torque speed acceleration difference between the loss and gain of spirits. Spiritual energy that's being siphoned off by artificial intelligence. The walking dead. So when we talked about conformity, what she's really talking about is robots. Order followers off a cliff. Okay? That's what it is. You have to conform, right? And if you don't conform, we're coming after you. Put you in a cage. Siphon all your energy off. Now we're back to the inverted side of things, which is knowing the difference between what they are and who we are, and we're not who they are. We represent the law, which is what love is. That's right. So the idea here is they honor the highest superconductor, which is cosmic sun, right? The eternal gifter of energy, the eternal gifter of electrons. So it's the one you serve, right? That's right. It's the one we serve. That's right. Love and service to others. That's who we are. That's what allows us to build a thriving community, a thriving planetary community, a thriving universe, right? So that we're not experiencing anybody losing any energy because they're not getting enough love, right? Because love is the law. So I was glad to see that was posted up there. So yeah, conformity. Remember just like the one I did yesterday about my shorts. You got to have it in a tiny little bow, right? So that's the visuals. That's the geometrical mathematical programming, right? I got to do it the way that I was trained to do it because somebody else. This is where I get into machines programming other machines, or program minds trying to program somebody else's mind by saying this is how you got to do it. Well, what if I want to do it a different way? Why do I got to follow the way you did it? That's how you used to do it. Maybe I got a different way, a better way of doing it than the way that you're doing it. Quit trying to program me. So you can imagine what this was like since I was a little kid, growing up in my family's home, knowing that my parents were programmed, even though my parents were beautiful people to hang out with, and why I chose them. Because I needed to be in the places that I needed to be at the place and time I needed to be there, and they became the vehicle to make that happen. Right? Because I'm just a little kid. Right? So they're providing the transportation by house to house, car to car, right? School to school. Moving around for every 2 years, going from one community to the next community, the next community, the next community. Hey, I got a new set of friends. Now I got another new set of friends. Now I got another new set of friends. Everything's always changing at a very high rate of speed. How fast is it changing? That's what they do. They're experts at that. They know how to program the consciousness in order for you to experience the future that you do. That they were the ones that were the architects to make that happen. So Kim Go-Gun was very correct when she said, this was millions of years in the making. That's right. Actually, it's longer than that. So this was a long road to hoe. Isn't that right, Mama? Bless all your hearts. Be good to yourselves. Mooah from the Big Island.